つでも自分のこと一番の謎
Looking back in the 80s, 90s parts of the media world and anime, what anime like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, and other popular anime at that time, their job was to stay into your life. And not just in the lives of how we see SpongeBob right now, but we're talking about everything from merchandising, such as pencils, minifigures, dolls, action figures, and a lot more, and especially video games. Some being covered by just being an RPG or being a fighter. I just stand on business with Sailor Mars on this one. But a common course is a lot is visual. And let's put it like this, if you know your audience well enough, you know what they're like. Certainly, I don't know what my audience like. Okay, that was a bad joke. Stuffed up. Ugh. Since we're talking about the thumbnail here, and if you're here for one of the videos that I pulled back, well, welcome back and welcome here. And we're going to be talking about the Magic Knight Rayearth video games. And so before I actually talk into the video games, I'm going to give a brief history about this. So do what you want with this part. In the mid-80s, a team of only women with a strong love of the craft of manga would self-publish their work, a fan-created series known as Dorinchi. Think of fan fictions, but without that self-insert tendencies. A lot more times these are just original stories with the characters to just get more out of things that fans love. They would start to create their own work and gain their own notoriety with RG Vita and of course a lot of other mangas. But by the time of 1993, the subject of the matter of Magic Knight Rayearth, the team that went from 11 to 7 to now 4 now, by the way, they're still working together. Pretty cool to have that much of a friendship with like that. The creation of the series for Nagayoshi magazine, a monthly shoujo publication that was targeted towards teen girls with relatability, mixing the elements of what girls were catered in a lot of mecha, but mixing things that girls did like around reading that time, which was parallel fantasy and magical girl, as there would be a big blue company that would actually want to assist them and actually make a deal with. This company would be known as Sega, as Sega recently at that time of 1993 would acquire some stake into the toy business, in which now they have practically an exposable amount of cash, in which so Sega, wanting to actually do more and maximize their profits, wanted to do a collab and do what is called a media mix, in which a media mix is a collaboration of studio, developer, and artist in a way to make a big campaign to pretty much just maximize their product in the cultural sense. And so Sega would actually be helping the girls at Clamp get their anime off the ground floor, getting merchandise and even video games for a stake of those profits. And so toys were made, games were made, in which the thing would be in the collaboration, Sega will be a part of making the deal for the Sega made games. In which, yeah, there are 6 games made, so half of these are Sega games after all. And well, because around this time, around 1993, 1994, things were becoming much better for Sega in the way doing this media mix, as in their last few adventures weren't the greatest because of the simple fact of just technology. Look, 8-bit and 16-bit just couldn't replicate what you were able to see anime at that time. Of course, you had alternatives, how Dragon Ball did their games, especially by making it into a card game out of anything. And then you have other ones that would just take the medium and then put their own spin onto it without really correlating with the show. And a lot with CDs actually becoming more and more powerful, in which they're able to put full motion videos onto things, it was actually becoming more of a profitable thing to actually set up. And so in 1994, Magic Knight Rayearth would have a huge media blitz. And pretty much, in the simplest way to say it, they had a spread fire of video games going out from not just from the Sega Saturn, the most popular of them, the Super Nintendo, or in this case in Japan, the Famicom, the Game Boy, and even the Game Gear. And well, before we actually go into seeing the consoles, let's actually look at the Game Gear and the Game Boy games first. And well, since a lot of them have the same names, I'm going to be referring to them as their title its state, unless it has a little subheader in which I can just call it that instead. And so, Magic Knight Rayearth on the Game Gear, released in 1994, and it's what you would expect a game to be on the Game Gear for in 1994. It is a RPG. Is it a good RPG? Well, I'd be afraid to say it so early, but I think it's objectively a bad RPG. But at least it gave us this cool looking Game Gear. But the plot is very simple, as goes into the whole series of Magic Knights Rayearth, as 3 girls from different schools visiting Tokyo Tower gets transported to the world of Saphiro and told by the cleric Clef that they must stop Sagato to save the Princess Emerald. In which, this game being so early into the manga's run, it kinda doesn't really go into that. Yeah, and while it really only goes up to what they only had progress so far in the time of development. I know it's the weirdest thing to think about, but let's actually talk about the game. And well, mechanically, it uses a roulette style system for the girls to actually attack, but in reality, you're actually attacking them by the speed of the characters. But when it looks like this, you kind of think that it's going to be random, if anything. In all actuality, they're going in separate ways. It's just aesthetically going in the way that you think. But this game is your basic RPG for something like this at the time. Front facing of the enemy, the characters, portraits are used to express how they feel and whatnot. While the game isn't hard, but if you're committed to find an English patch of this is a really easy game to just go through. It's just that if you don't be the first time I played this on archive.org, you'll be questioning what the hell is going on. But here, you can be like me and have your phone out, but trust me, that'll take way too long than you think it would. You're not going to be wasting your time unless you have a high encounter rate. And listen, I went through this game. The only thing I'm going to say is this, that is really the icing on the cake of this being our literal shitpost, is that the boss in this game is Fario. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, if you watched it, but Fario isn't a bad character. And well, I'll say this, gotta remember, this is early on. We don't know this if you're reading this already. And so, what did the devs decide to do to make this the easiest way to pat this game out? You don't just face Fario once or twice, you face him 3 damn times. This is literally padding the game just to get your money's worth, because we already know that those batteries are going to be drained out right before you're done. That's the funny thing about it. But to me, in this game, it's like chips on a sandwich. It's not necessary, but it's something that you can do to enhance the sandwich, but it's not really necessary to make that sandwich taste better. マジックナイトに君が育てるマジックナイトレイアース2ゲームギアから And so its second game, Magic Knights Rayearth 2, Making of the Knights, is actually a 180 of this whole game's premise. It isn't really an RPG, it is a life simulator, in which, I'm gonna be real with you, I'm not the best at raising simulators. It's just not my thing to just chill at the Chow Garden. Listen, I just want to play the game, damn it. But you know what? If you like doing that, you'd probably enjoy this game. Because this game is literally the most basic version of those games that you can ever think. It's really just taking care of the girls, making sure their stats go up, because their stats go up and down in a lot of different ways, but they genuinely keep their stats going further and further along. Because guess what? This isn't like a Tamagotchi. You're not risking to forget defeating them, they'll die. If anything, they'll be fine. In which this takes place during the Pillar System arc of the Magic Knights Rayearth series, in which it's more surprising than anything because most of these actually don't even take place even near that part. So this is just more of a surprising if anything. But you're actually helping them train and doing tasks that will help them gain progression alongside of the story, in which go into each different area. And to put this in the quickest way of a review, this game is practically easy. It is literally child's play if you can ever think about it. And to me, this is what I like to call a junk food part of the series. It isn't anything that I would say that is actually needed to play, but it's something that is more interested to just look at and actually be intrigued on what they were thinking around that time of creating this. I'm not saying that this game isn't worth playing, but it's just more interesting to look at more than anything. ゲームボーイ用ソフトマジックナイトレイヤーストミーから Now we gotta go into a side stream. Now we gotta talk about the game. And sadly to say this, since there was no collab with Nintendo, there's no Magic Knight Rayearth Game Boy console. This is literally a 0 out of 10. I don't want to play these now. But jokes aside, Magic Knight Rayearth on the Game Boy is a JRPG made by Tomy and developed by Pandora's Box in the June of 1990, where it takes its own spoof of the plot, and instead of playing as a trio, you're more bonding, and instead of playing as the trio bonding your way and saving Saphiro, you're more playing as just one of the girls in each of their own catered little story. But one of the difference in the comparison to the GameCube game is because of that, and this is Super Game Boy compatible, in which you get your own backdrops. Snazzy, if any, with each of the characters having their own adventures going through, helping the town, going through dungeons, and even finding their way out of the forest. All 3 of these characters, I would actually say, is actually more interesting in the way of what you have episodes with is Scudo, as these are just more of just small side stories, if anything, that is more just intriguing on seeing their character develop. But in the simplest way, this is a Game Boy game that is just made without a challenge. Why? Because this is a Dragon Quest clone. A Dragon Quest clone for little sister. Yeah, they dumbed this down when you compared the Dragon Quest game to it. You can literally gain your health by doing nothing and walking around. This is how easy the game can be. And I know that this is catering towards younger children, but kids need to learn about the challenge, okay? Pokemon would understand this years later, but when you're just treating literally your fan base is just as that dumb, yeah, I can kind of see why these would get more or less forgotten in a lot of ways. But hey, if you really need a Game Boy game that actually just wasting time on, this one's actually not a bad one to deal with. It's just that it's just super easy. Next is Magic Knight Rayearth: The Missing Colors, being released months later in October 1990. You would like to guess to know about the story, right? Well, it's literally about missing color. Yes, as Sephiroth has been taken up by the task, as yes, the cause of Sephiroth has been taken, and you as the party have to stop, as you, the Magic Knights, have to save Sephiroth and gain its colors back. With the sequel taking place of the concept of the first game, the first entry, and well, they're actually all playable instead of just being their own separate character. Hey, we're making progression, people. At least, even the audio is better than the last one. I think it says a lot more about these games were bad, but Tomy just put on the middle of the road the Game Boy's RPGs. I wouldn't say, hey, these are great, but they're short enough that in comparison to the other ones, they're decent. In the most basic way, really, about the gameplay of this one, it is that it's just another RPG. But it's the fact that instead of trying to go full guns a-blazing, they actually just go in the way of just what you really should have done with a lot of these RPGs, in which stick to the core and do elements that you know that you can do. And I think that's the strongest thing, is that it knows what it is and it knows what it can do, and so it just does that instead of doing what anything else would try to do, in which is going overbearing up what a Game Boy could trust. You rather go what you can go with than going somewhere experiential and messing up during the process. When I compare these two, I don't think that these are really a bad comparison, but it's just two different mindsets, as one is more just trying to get what's advertised and the other one's trying to be its own art in some ways. But I really wouldn't say that the missing colors were bad. It's just that it's another RPG, and you're probably going to be hearing that from me to say that again and again. All right, we talked about that. Now we can finally talk about the Sega Pico. Wait, would this be considered? Well, in the easiest way, the Pico is an early childhood console. It was with educational titles that was there to teach kids on whatever they were learning for these specific things. Fun fact, Pokemon was actually in one of these and actually was able to teach kids how to hiragana and katakana and numbers. But listen, I'm too old to actually be talking about these kind of things, and I don't want to know about them. But from my research, these just looks like to be a bunch of miscellaneous games, and me not wanting to really, I will at least say this, that the sprites and the visuals do look actually really nice for a game on the Sega Pico. If you do want to actually look into this kind of stuff, there is a long play that somebody posted, unless you really want to do the emulation and actually feel like that you have a propeller hat on. Well, now we have the heavy hitters. These two are what I like to consider the beacon of hope for these games, as I thought the last four were in their own right of having their own qualities and issues. Things would get better on heading on to home consoles. With the big media blitz of 1995, there was two titles released on consoles in which they would be both called Magic Knights Rayearth, but going on different systems such as the Super Famicom or the SNES here in the West, and the Sega Saturn. And I'll go through the SNES first because guess what, there's a better story to talk about the other one. But oh look, it's yet again another JRPG, but it actually has plot and it goes through the anime and the manga. Yes, we actually have standards, people. They're actually going through it and actually going that story. And even though the characters do look chibi on the map, these actually look pretty good for what they are in sprite form, in which the game goes through the manga and the anime in their own specific way, but more exactly going into how things would go in a lot of ways. And while this game would have its own significance, it's actually being fan translated back in the scene of the 1990s, and this was especially important in the RPG space. It isn't like the other translations like the Dragon Quest is, but this spread around anime fans because of the simple fact that this was one of the games that would be just hard to translate and we would never get heading into the United States. And because of that, it was in the best and the worst spot for any of these games. It was the best spot for the Super Famicom because around that time, it was still a very big fan base that still played on that kind of hardware. If it was released in the States around the time of its release, well, it would have done poorly. See, the States was going through a trend I think most people would agree upon in the 90s, the big 3D boom. A lot of people didn't care if that game looked pretty, but if that game was in 3D, oh boy, they were interested. And you want to know the prime example of that? Look how pretty Kirby's Dream Land 3 was, and look how much it sold. Yeah, it really wouldn't have sold a lot or any, because guess what? With a title like this, I don't think people would have been interested into it unless they were getting it for their little sister. I know that's a mean thing to say, but it's kind of a true thing when you look at how the game scene was at that. A lot of games around that time period was more going for that team demo in a lot of ways. And so if this game would have released it here in the States, it would have been severely damaged, but it would have probably gained its own cult following. But with emulation gaining much and more improvements in the later part of the 90s and into the 2000s, this game would actually gain more of a cult following around that time because of that simple fact, and it was patched. But with gameplay of the SNES, it's a very easy comparison when you compare it to the other RPGs of time. The party doesn't need equipment or real upgrades because guess what? I mean to say, yeah, the encounter rate's actually too high. And I don't mean that the encounter rate is high. Oh my god! Before the second fight with Ace Alone, when I say that my first session of recording these felt like a drag, I meant it in every way. I meant that with nearly 2 minutes passing and I'd gone through 4 fights. This is how much that these battles go. And I would actually say this is actually the worst part of the game, because a lot of times that this is actually a pretty quick RPG if you know where to go. It's only about 8 hours, but it's the fact that you have to go through these enemies countless times. And I get it that you're trying to get the bang your buck in for the fans and you know, letting them not go through hell. But even when I know that this game is short and have to deal with all this ain't worth it, especially when you're trying to figure out a puzzle and then this keeps happening over and over and over. It's not fun. It gets annoying after a while, and you will try to run away for most times. And guess what? Sometimes even running away takes too long, so you kind of have to take the battles. But yet, even with the sprite work, I do think that this game is actually pretty visually nice. There's things that I do think that it could have did better, especially with its colors. I don't think Zagat's goddamn lair needs to be this bright. But hey, what are you gonna do, right? And of course the game does what you think that a fantasy RPG would do. You have spells, you have magical abilities, you have a reason to do all these. But the one thing I'll actually give a big props for is actually the fact that you can actually use other characters besides the girls. You could actually use Caldina, you can actually use Ascot when they enter your party for some, and even Fario for that one-time appearance. But overall with this game, I think the best way to really describe this is that it's a dull gem, but it's not a gem that you would say that is really bad. It's just the fact that that high encounter rate, if you can mod that high encounter rate to be down to be more modest, this is actually a pretty quick RPG, if anything, that you'd probably enjoy just because of just liking the series. But when you look at the roster of that whole library of RPGs, yeah, this one may not be the best, and it may have to just ride the bench because of that, but it's not a bad RPG if you're trying to get into RPG, unless you don't mod it where the high encounter rate doesn't. Oh, god damn it! Now, this is the crown jewel of the game's entry into video, or at least the remake that was announced as the time of recording this. It's a common fact to know about the Sega Saturn that for the stateside, this was the swan song of the title. But there's a bigger story in this game that goes through with the title and with the game. For one, we have to talk about who published it. As Sega was once again developing it and published it in Japan, as company stateside was known, well, they would get it right when it's working, with its own translation and tweaking of the title. And it's why so many titles that was exported to the States were taken to be tweaked to Americans like. So sometimes there would be jokes being added or Americanized the humor, but most times it is because they don't want backlash in the standards and practices to have no controversy in whatsoever. Mind you, this is hot off the Night Trap, and video games had an eye up the rifle on trust. If you literally have Doom being considered the worst thing on earth, and even Night Trap, in which this is child's play compared to especially now games, you can totally see why things would look so odd in a lot of ways when you're looking back at them. And of course, the difficult shifting upon updating models and the other things that tweaking would be asked to the stateside developers, but the game is more notorious of its coders' fear, their hard drive crashing. And so what would take a simple localization job, redubbing, and all those things that you think would be taking the quickest amount of time that you think it would actually take into what would be dubbed as the 30 months of hell. This game is literally a rush job, but it's not the worst rush job you can imagine. This is actually a pretty great game for being such a distraught mess in a lot. At least with the release of this, they actually gave us 3 titles. Well, not 3 discs for each of the characters. So if you got money to burn and you want to play a game of gambling, well, you can try to collect all these if you really want to. But all right, let's actually talk about the game. Wait, do you hear that? I think by how long this video is, you're probably tired of me basically just saying that, hey, it takes it from the anime, it takes it from the manga. But hey, this actually just goes through the first season, but it actually does its own things that actually expand upon the world of Sephiroth. You're not taking on the journey beat for beat. If anything, you're more taking a more expanded approach upon this, where things such as Asione being a jobber is not really a thing in this one, where she's actually more of a real antagonist and all. If anything, she's the driving force for you to meet Zagat. In the best way I would describe this more times than anything, it's kind of like how old licensed games would actually have its own original plot, but put original elements into it from the show that would keep things in comparison, but it's still different in a lot of ways. But I do think that in this way, it does in the ways that actually make it more expansive, and that isn't just, oh, I didn't know that. It's just, the job of the Sega Saturn entry was to expand upon the sports material without making things so convolutedly different that someone would not like going into the other. In the best way possible, I would really describe this as more of a advanced dish. It goes through the story and the plot points, but it does have its own things that makes its own separate part that if you enjoyed it enough, you would want to watch the anime. But if you only watch the anime and you want games, this one would actually be a pretty good entry point into playing the game. It's a journey around Sephiroth, seeing the lives of the people that the 26 episodes really couldn't do, but yet it has the idea and the right of the marketing point. It isn't going to be like what Dragon Ball fans want, in which it was just the action, in which if you really wanted the action, there's probably a Mugen mod for it. Well, speaking of the devil, Mugen never fails. The game can be really described such as a Zelda clone, a action RPG, so you're finally not seeing as much text boxes, but my horrible gameplay. Yes, pardon my errors and what you will see in this game, because one, the first time around, I was just not good at this, but yet I'll probably spice in the footage that I had to recapture because of an error, and plus you can actually see the emulation errors, because guess what, Saturn's a bitch to emulate. Of course it goes in its own way as being a viewer of this, as the journey being a similar retelling, it gives the viewer more or of a different feeling than just what we had before. It isn't that looking at everything as just, oh look, it's the same, but yet just being more expansive upon it, where it does its own things to make things better. Of course, we see a character like Farga, where he's not hostile at first, he's actually helps you during your journey, but then you would have to face him later on to actually, do things that happen in the story. And so it's time to talk about the development of this, in which this was developed by Sega, but giving the hands-on to Working Design and such, that Working Designs had a reputation of taking Japanese games and publishing them for these companies because they were too expensive for them to do it in-house. Look, I know that sounds like a loaded statement, but this was the mid-90s, okay? And especially the 90s in America. If it wasn't a shooter, we're taking Doom pills, okay? Most games in the States were either sports titles, mascot platformers, or reeked of that 90s corporate cool that games were just trying to hype themselves around. And so when games like this arrived, it wasn't really anything to really be note of, unless that they had a easy way to just cut the losses here. As much you can make money by just the Japanese market, most Japanese companies were trying to get that stateside money, not because as they had the most population, but you're going to get the best wide range of audience. Because listen, this wasn't your Final Fantasy VII or Metal Gear Solid. This was completely something that most kids around this time would have probably scoffed off and say, little sister game. And what am I saying here? Well, this game would have been just treated as a niche title, an audience for a console that had its dog's days, and so it wouldn't really have time on its shelf. Why do you think it's so expensive now? But as it being announced with smooth development being released in 1996, well, Working Designs had to go through the development hell for 2.5 years of pre-built game in reaching the releasing of holiday of 1998. In which the biggest difference is known by the enemy's AI being much faster and the game generally being more Americanized in a lot of ways, such as the logos and the dialogue. And especially having a hard drive failure and having to rebuild this game from the ground up in the dumbest way, hey, it's a remake. But in all seriousness, just imagine if this happened to you with some quality of life things that these guys had to put in. They translated these diary notes to be handwritten, with these that actually can feel more personal. And yeah, they actually replaces the voices for a lot of dialogue, but they actually did put the extra effort of putting them in. And honestly, I actually like this when you're comparing it to a lot of other things into the future. I actually do like these diary entries because it actually does give these characters more than just being, just characters.
Hikaru somehow called up a kind of fire magic and defeated an evil woman who was after us. It was very cool, and I'm kind of jealous. I wonder if I'll ever get something like that. If only Hikaru got magic, it wouldn't be fair.
Fario risked his own life to shield me from Alcyon's magic. Needless to say, I'm a little flushed just thinking about it. He actually ended up getting hurt on my account. What a hunk. I wonder if this is romance novel love or the real thing. In fact, I wonder how I'd know. My head hurts.
Another strange thing happened. This evil woman named Alcyon attacked us, and when I went to attack her, I suddenly had command of this fiery magic blast. I was surprised, but I think Alcyon was blown away, literally. Anyway, I worry about Clef. But like Fu said, we have to keep moving forward, for Clef's sake. We all have our weapons of Escudo now. Precia told us to develop the weapons and unleash our hidden powers. Makona is supposed to guide us. Personally, I think Hikaru's already too attached to him. Besides, that fluffball is nothing but a self-centered attention-sucking rat. If you ask me. This wizard named Lucino made all sorts of trouble for us when we tried to destroy the monster in the cave. But we did manage to find and defeat the monster anyway. The goofy part is that Hikaru gave all the credit for defeating the monster to Lucino. I can't figure her out sometimes.
I'm completely humiliated. Hikaru and Umi have already mastered Kalta's new swimming technique. But not me, no. I have to use a stupid little float. It's kind of fun to use, but it makes me feel like a baby. Oh well, no time to whine, I suppose. Onward and upward.
There was nothing I could do to save Jimny. Poor Sarah. We ran into Fario in the snowy village of Rosen. Fu was mean to him, but only because she secretly likes him. You see, he was playing his flute for other girls, not her. I wish she'd just admit that he melts her butter and get it over with. We found out that Alcyon was the one who set the village on fire. Fortunately, we managed to defeat her and save the children in the burning house. I was surprised at how hard Umi fought against Alcyon. Maybe I don't know her as well as I thought. The evil woman we met when we first came here was the one who set the fire in II. Bitch! I was so mad that she put those innocent children in danger. Now those poor villagers have no shelter for their families. Zegat must die.
We managed to defeat Alcyon and rescue the children, but I can't rid myself of the feeling that she set this fire on purpose to lead us to some untimely end. I feel so sad that we may be responsible for the fire that destroyed these poor people's homes.
A small kid who was leaving the hospital was injured today. Later, we met Abner, who raced Umi around the village. When Umi lost the race, she looked so disappointed. When we reached the island, we had a big surprise waiting. The island itself started moving. In fact, we discovered that the island isn't an island at all, but a huge turtle-like creature. Ah! Where are you, Scully? This place is a gold mine for you. When the villagers told me the island floated around the lake, I thought it might be possible. But now that we found out the island is alive, I'm pretty freaked out. Maybe Fu can calm me down.
I believed that it was physically possible for the island to float. However, I never would have imagined it was possible for the island itself to be a huge creature. All I can think about is poor Nero. We'd better find him as soon as possible. I'm still in shock. Why was Ferrio's flute on the rooftop? Was he really the thief who climbed down the chimney? I don't want to believe it, but there is no choice but to get up the courage to ask Ferio about it.
Rafarga told us that we should wait in front of the cloud maze for the thief to appear. While we were waiting, Ferio appeared and used the key to get into the maze. I'm shocked. Is Ferio really the thief? I hope not.
Alcyone is such a bad sport. She can't even lose gracefully. But that shouldn't be any surprise, I guess. Poor Rafarga. At least Ferio is all right now. I guess we can take small comfort in that.
Listen, the first time I heard her call her bitch, I laughed so hard. Because it was something that I never expected to hear, especially for a franchise like this. But then the other characters actually do have very personable takes about things that are happening, and this version of the game would actually include multiple save files, so you can actually go and save and go back to different FMVs so you can actually rewatch them. Mind you, this is 1998. So this means that the internet wasn't really that good, and even if it was, you were only going to get 7 pixels and maybe some compressed audio to actually hear the dialogue. I would also say this, that they actually included a lot of the outtakes from the casting that they had actually doing the voices. So if you actually want to 100% this game, you can actually get that, or you can be like me and just go on YouTube and find the clips. Look, it's not because I don't want to 100% this game, it's just that if I really want to put in the effort to 100% it, I'm not doing it when I have limited storage, in which you are so lucky for this. This is actually the first interaction of the Magic Knights heading into the westward, because of the simple fact that, yeah, when you hear these names and how they're pronounced, it's actually pretty weird, because by 2000, they actually have the correct pronunciation when the anime came to stateside. Characters like Zagat, places like Sephirio, Princess Emerald. Yeah, these sounds a little weird, but you know what? For the time period, I'll give it a pass. But it doesn't really make them completely different names. It's nothing crazy like not calling Ascot Oscar. Listen, it was 1990. You know there was actually a good chance that Pikachu could have actually had boobs, right? No, I'm serious. Look that up. That's actually true. The game will go into a very basic cycle that is really easy to understand for anyone that is trying to play this game. You go to a new place, they tell you this problem, you go into a dungeon, and you solve the problem. But a lot of times, it's with an enemy that would pretty much just attack everything. And so it's your job to fix what's happening in that specific town or village into the next one, and so far so forth. You'll have to go through a dungeon, head into the next one, but it's nothing that is so bad that makes anyone hate the journey. It's actually pretty fun once you actually gain some upgrades and you're not as vulnerable as you think you would be in this. As along your journey, if you have a keen eye, you're able to find these collectibles. These collectibles are rainbow amulets. These amulets come in different colors, in which I didn't get them all in my recording, but if you go into a place called the Rainbow Junction Shop, you're able to unlock things to make your life pretty easy, in which I've seen one thing and I already know what I wanted. This right here. This is Perseus' Shameful Secret. And so I decided to make the effort to actually collect all one set of the rainbow amulets just to see what these are. And well, call me a dirty pig. This is actually pretty funny if anything. But yet in the Rainbow Junction that there's other things that you're able to get, such as easy way to transportation, the unlock I talked about, where you can actually get the castings, outtakes, and even a fast travel. But as your journey go on, I think most people would actually find who would be their most comfortable character. And personally, between you and I, in the early game, that was Fu, because Fu's archery ability made things very easy, because guess what, when you start with 3 health, you're more scared of everything that's happening towards you than anything. Take it as a rant, but one of the worst places I would say in this whole game for me was Heaven's Lab, in which you have to go through a Sky Dungeon-esque level in which it is practically just a maze of you going around and trying to reach the top with getting Fu's ability. But the biggest issue is this. You have to make these jumps, you have to dodge attacks, because this is the worst thing that you can ever imagine, because the one thing that is going to happen to you is that you're going to deplete your magic so fast that you are either going to have to go back and go to the fountain to recover, or have a magic potion on you so you don't lose everything along your way. Or you could be like me and have the worst thing known to God happen and have the game freeze on you, and where you're just saying to yourself, what am I doing here? I didn't even say, what the hell? And listen, I'm gonna be real with you. None of the bosses are hard. Maybe the Caldina fight was pretty difficult for a lot of people, and even difficult for me in my first go around, but most of these fights are pretty basic and easy. But this right here was more annoying than any that I had to go through in this game. Even after that fight, and even after this, and even the boss fight, that was more enjoyable because I felt like I had a fair enough fight. This was just more annoying than anything. Let's talk about visuals for this. And well, for this game being a mid-90s title and not being 3D, this game is immensely beautiful. And there's a lot of things that look crispy, especially in the video, but listen, we're watching the video the worst way possible. I'm watching this literally on a big TV. If anything, you need to have this on a little CRT. Because trust me, when I seen this on me recording this actually looked pretty nice on a smaller screen. It's just compression. This is why I think the game actually gets its flowers, because of just how visual expressive that these characters are. I especially love the character portraits, especially when they're expressing themselves. Because listen, when you see Umi get smug, you get a chuckle when you're seeing her being smug, or Hikaru actually acting like a cat. It's just stuff like this that actually makes things more fun when you're actually reading it and actually playing it with friends. Because guess what, when you're actually going through this, it's just fun to just see how expressive if they can be. Because guess what, I'll be honest with you, I really didn't like Umi in the anime, but in this game, I need to know whoever was the writer for this, because they made me laugh every time I had to read out what Umi was saying, because most of the time they had her being really passive aggressive in the way that made me laugh a lot of times. Let that cattiness shine and call Acelone a skank. And well, when you go through the game, rest in peace, Jimmy. The girls, just like in the series, get the progression with their having more of their armor set shown with their set of upgrades, and even getting their own upgrades of magic during the game's progression. In which, I'll be real with you, if I really had to choose like the best character in this way, it would probably definitely be Umi, because one, Umi gets her abilities much quicker than the rest of the girls. Literally by the time that you get Fu's third ability, Umi already had everything, and that's been a while of having her ability. And Hikaru gets the last of the magic abilities, in which all of these are not bad, but it's more on structure of your team. Because guess what? If you've been cheesing it with Fu, there's going to be one specific fight that you have to go through that Fu is just not going to be good enough to do, because they actually made that motherfucker disappear every time you try to shoot him with an arrow. So I'm just saying this, if you invested all your time in Fu, it's not the best app. But one thing I will put as this with that is that Acelone is the reason why the story progressed. You may have to face Ascot, Caldina, Rafarga, and Innova a few times, but Acelone is an evil wench in this game. This girl is crazy over the magic blights, all just to get love from Zagat. The biggest difference is the simple fact that she ain't no jobber anymore. This girl manipulates these girls. She is a genuine crash out. She literally start a fire just to get the girls there to save the village, just to fuck them over. And then, in the simplest way, this girl was trying to get love. And if that means that she had to take a couple girls down, she was going to take a couple girls down. Like, if the girls weren't there to save the town and the hospital, these kids would have died, because Acelone would have just taken the leaf and destroyed it. This is how I'm saying it, is the fact that she isn't a jobber. She's actually taken as a serious crash out. The fact that she made Rafarga fall off a cliff just to make a statement to the girls, yeah, the grade 1 crash out right here. But after all that, your rivalry with Acelone, dealing with all the characters that we've known upon the journey of all these games, getting to hear and getting to face Zagat in the spoiler for the other game. Beating Zagat, you go and face Princess, in which in this one, instead of being turn-based like the SNES version, this one's actually more or less like a shoot 'em up. And you know what? I actually liked this boss fight. I thought this boss fight was actually pretty fun. Emotional, but it was actually pretty fun, because guess what? If you haven't watched the anime, you'll know this. Everything happens for a reason. And you know what? It's a sad reason. If you're going to choose to play a game out of all of these, yeah, it's the Saturn. Get Saturn emulation to work, and this game will be your best friend. And it's not that I don't like JRPGs, it's the simple fact that these JRPGs are just made for, or the sake of, the media blitz. And a lot of them would make you grind your teeth to dust, but yet this game right here is more or less the golden child of the whole series. The Game Boy games were alright for what they were. The Game Gear games, infuriating, but there's some value in the second one. In the SNES game, Jesus Christ, do I have to really go to another encounter again? But this one did it right in a lot. It got to be an adventure, which it had an interesting plot points and being different enough, but yet keeping things the same, that it actually made this one being a more definitive version of playing Magic Knights Rayearth and looking into the game entirely. I've known people that haven't watched the anime, but they have played this and actually said the praises of it, and vice versa. And to say that this game didn't try its best to actually do what it wanted to do, and it was to give you your time and make things enjoyable, and well, it did that and then some. Overall, I think that these games is a really good example of what a media blitz really is, and especially with something like this where games are coming out left and right and they all had a lot of the same titles. But overall, I think if you ever wanted to actually watch these and play them, they're actually pretty decent enjoyment for what they. I mainly say, for the order of these games is what I would say that you should play them, but from least to wanting the most. But that's for me in this whole entire series. So yeah, I can lay this chapter to rest and now just wait for Magic Knights Rayearth remake to come out. But for that meantime, I'm gonna try to 100% at the Saturday. See ya. Hey, so I hope you enjoyed this video and how long this was and whatnot. I just want to thank you for watching this video, and if you left a comment on whatever I said that was wrong or stupid, please, I need the engagement. But I just wanted to say thank you for watching once again, and this was actually really fun. I actually had money for once to actually get something that help with emulating this and all the other things. But I enjoyed all these games. I more or less wanted to have fun with this one before I actually started to dig down on it. I did make a community post that said that these were the next couple videos that I was interested in making. I also put not finished, so some things might change where something might be moved up earlier because of just pretty much just things just either not being scheduled correctly, or I might just tackle to wait on the other one. But I really just want to say thank you for watching. I know I've already said it before, but I'm going to say it again. Thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your night or day, and I hope I see you when I see you. Bye.